improvements over the years. See if you can match them.
Support for disabling it again. But for some reason, Samsung, as of the time we're recording this, has removed that option. Overall though, I don't actually hate Bixby. She runs locally on the device, which means that on top of the additional functionality that other assistants can't handle, like executing voice macros, she is noticeably faster for transactional things like turn on the flashlight. But that's a double-edged sword, because compared to the Google Assistant, which runs in the cloud, Bixby is still, over a year later, far less likely to understand me. The fingerprint sensor has been moved into the center, just like on the S9 series, but I actually didn't notice it that much since I ended up using Intelligent Scan, Samsung's unique combination of iris scanning and facial recognition most of the time anyway. So now we're at the part of the video where usually I list out a bunch of specs. But it's a little bit complicated this time. Which processor you get under the hood of your Note 9 will actually depend on your region. Now the good news is that it doesn't actually matter too much. We only got one, so we couldn't do a head-to-head comparison, but basically, the Snapdragon 845's Adreno GPU is stronger if you're a gamer. While Samsung's internal tuning of the Exynos 9810 CPU seems to give it the edge on that side of things. Honestly though, we're kind of splitting hairs at this point, and Samsung knows it. They hardly even talked about performance in their keynote, because phones have basically succumbed to the same failing of Moore's Law that we've been dealing with on the PC side for the last 5 years now. So whether you're running a Note 9 or a OnePlus 6 for literally half the price, you can expect basically the same performance in your pocket, at least from idle. Now the water cooling marketing nonsense aside, the big heat pipe that Samsung is using in the Note 9 does actually result in relatively little throttling, even in CPU intensive tasks.
Well met.
And that, I think right there, is the most remarkable thing about the Note 9. Not the heat pipe specifically, but the fact that it's bigger than yours, and they managed to squeeze that, the S Pen, the 4,000 milliamp hour battery that's big enough that even with the weird battery drain bug that I get sometimes, I still managed to make it through the day. They crammed basically everything into this phone. Other notable inclusions, up to 8 gigs of LPDDR4 memory, that's in the 512 gig storage version, IP68 water resistance, NFC, high-speed wireless charging, micro SD expansion, a headphone jack, and stereo speakers. Samsung, by the way, with their spectacular HDR OLED displays and flexible audio connectivity, continues to deliver, hands down, the best mobile movie watching experience. So here's the thing. Almost always when I'm working on a phone review, because I actually switch to them as my only phone, I wish that I had the form factor of phone X with the features of phone Y and the camera of phone Z or something along those lines. Most recently, I was actually working on my full review of the Oppo Find X, and I was crestfallen when I realized that it doesn't have NFC. I mean, that's apparently not a big deal in China, but I use NFC for two-factor authentication on a very regular basis, so it was a real bummer for me. And back to the Note 9, the camera hasn't changed much since the S9 series, but that's not really a terrible thing. Its low-light performance is still outstanding, and everything from well-lit indoor stills to more challenging scenarios like poorly lit video came out as well as I would expect from any flagship smartphone today. As for the new Bluetooth-enabled S Pen, as a not really a stylus guy, it's mostly a handy little bonus. You can write on the screen even when it's off. I guess that's pretty cool. But I mostly didn't find many occasions to use it, even including the remote camera shutter functionality. With that said, I expect some really cool things to come out of the S Pen once the SDK lands. Until then, assuming that you can afford one, because it's not cheap, the Note 9 is gonna have to settle for being just the zero compromises smartphone, a designation that I have never given to any other handheld. Thanks to PUBG Mobile for sponsoring today's video. PUBG Mobile is the official mobile version of the PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. It's a free-to-play battle. So here's my problem. I get subpar battery life out of Samsung phones specifically, and it's something that has been an ongoing issue for me for years. Sometimes it happens right away, but other times it takes a while. So in my Galaxy S6 video, for example, I talk about how it has better battery life than its predecessor. With the S6 Active, I was impressed that it had enough to get me through the day, when other people are reporting the damn thing gets them through 2 days. With the S7, I did end up with 30% battery at the end of each day, which is about right, given my use, except that I started having the issue after I recorded my review, to the point where, looking back,
our battle mages
over the last 3 years,
magic among the fallen.
I realized it's not Android phones. That's what I thought it was. It's Samsung specifically where I run into these issues. And I even talked about it at a video back at CES this year that went up on Unbox Therapy.
Which smartphone is in your pocket and why?
So I'm on the Pixel 2 XL. My Galaxy S8, something I have installed on it is making the battery drain really fast. I haven't had the time to deal with it.
You sound like the most reluctant Pixel user I've ever heard in my life.
So Samsung actually reached out after having seen that video. Any of the things that I've said on this channel. The S8 had middling battery life from the get-go. Battery life on the phone that can do it all is just not that impressive. And asked to help. But even though it's been over 6 months since then, we still haven't come any closer to answering the question of why is it that every time I pull this thing out of my pocket, it's hot. So we came up with an idea for how we can find out. And we'll tell you about it after this message from our sponsor, CableMod. I didn't want to get more. So we devised a test. I didn't want to give up my daily driver S9 Plus because even with my issues, it was still getting me through the day the vast majority of the time. So we reached out to our buds over at D-Brand to send us a couple of skinned phones. One of them is a brand new Galaxy S9 Plus, camo skin, of course, because D-Brand. And the other one is a brand new Pixel 2 XL. I picked these two phones specifically because of their very similar specs and feature set, even down to little things like the fact that they both have always-on displays. Also, I had been using the Pixel 2 XL before working on my S9 review and had not had any battery drain issues with it, even with the same app loadout. So, let's walk through what we did to these phones. I actually handed my daily driver S9 Plus over to James, and he loaded both with as close as we could get, at least just kind of looking at them and comparing to what I use on my daily driver. So all the same apps, logged into the same accounts, always on display, on wake screen when you receive notifications, same screen timeouts, even similar wallpapers to make sure that if there's a difference in power consumption between one color or another on their OLED displays, that's not going to affect our data. The only problem is that when we ran our test the first time in our controlled environment, we got a result that didn't really add up with my experience. So our Pixel died when our S9 Plus still had double-digit battery life left. So we thought, okay, why don't we go back to the drawing board? Maybe we were a little bit lazy here because we had actually left both of the phones in Wi-Fi only mode. Neither of them actually had a SIM installed. And when I did hear from Samsung about my issues, that was one of the first things they asked about. What kind of data connection do you have? So we were like, okay, well, why don't we just run to the corner store and get a couple of SIMs and pop them in here. So it was like 30 bucks and we got exactly nothing for our effort. Because once again, the Samsung phone beat the Pixel 2 XL. Finally, we went, okay, I guess let's bite the bullet and run out and get more expensive SIMs with data, which actually adds some inconvenience to this whole thing. Like, we've actually been working on this video for almost 2 months now. First, we had to spend more money. Then we had to wait for the phone's billing cycle to refresh so that the data would come online. The point is, after all that, the results were still the same. So, finally, I gave in and I said, okay, James, here's my daily driver S9 Plus. Why don't you compare it to yours? When we did that, my phone died while the other one still had 80% battery. So it's not in my imagination then, because the only other explanation here would be that my S9 Plus, which, and this is really interesting, when you actually use it heavily, doesn't seem to drain any faster than any other phone. But my S9 Plus, when it idles, either has like a craptastic battery with basically no real-world capacity, or there is something
We can rest
about
a little
a
easier
specific
now
way
that
of
this
using it
problem has been handled.
that triggers this behavior. And unfortunately, we're at the point now where we kind of have to just go to you, the public, with this and see if we can get some kind of action from them, because I can tell you guys, I haven't actually heard back from Samsung in over
I've collected
2 months,
many things
even though they were
over the
corresponding
years.
with me before
See
and
if
asking me,
can
you know,
match them.
questions that seemed
I
like they
believe we
might
should
care,
trade
like,
with
oh,
people
well,
of
you
all
know,
races
how are you
and
connected to
creeds,
data, and can you send a
except the
screenshot
nine
of your battery usage?
horrible creature.
Because that's the most frustrating thing about this entire experience. The fact that we can't pull any useful data off of the phone. When we look at the battery usage, sometimes we might get a hint. Like, here's a screenshot that shows Facebook Pages Manager using about 1-point-something% battery per hour. But that still doesn't account for the difference, and the whole thing still doesn't add up to 100%. Plus, I also have screenshots that I have also provided to Samsung that do not have any kind of indication of what's consuming it. So, the TLDR is this. Over the years, I've thought that there were either issues with Android battery life management or Samsung's battery life management, but every person that I've talked to is having a perfectly good experience. Samsung doesn't seem to have any helpful information to provide on the subject, and so without rooting, because that shouldn't be necessary, I'd love to know from you guys, or if Samsung can finally take a serious interest in helping me solve this problem, how we can fix this, because otherwise, both the S9 Plus and the Galaxy Note 9, depending on whether you want a stylus and a bigger battery, which of course is a big deal for me because this issue persists for me with the Note 9. This one's sitting at 53%, even though I charged it last night. I've hardly touched it today, and I don't even have my SIM in it. So, like, honestly, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit now because I'm just frustrated. You know, we were really hoping to come to you guys with like, aha! Here's the one app that kills your battery. I mean, who wouldn't click on that video, right? Or like, here's the perfect storm of apps that kills your battery life. But without endless trial and error, we just can't seem to get there. Like, I just got nothing else. I'm just sad. I just want to use this phone and have it work properly. Speaking of working properly, you know what works properly? D-brand skins. I mean, they're just a piece of high-quality 3M vinyl. How can they not work properly? You go on their configurator, we'll have that linked in the video description. You pick which device, and they've got all kinds of stuff they support. Phones, game consoles, game controllers, laptop computers, all kinds of great stuff. You select which colors and textures you want. You order them, they've got worldwide shipping, and it's affordable, and then you apply it to your device with one of their very helpful instructional videos, and now all of a sudden, boom, you look cooler, and your device is protected from incidental scrapes and scratches. Actually, it's been great for my Nintendo Switch, which I often slide in and out of my bag and would otherwise totally get dinged up. Oh yeah, they support the Nintendo Switch now, which you would know if you watched Scrapyard Wars and got annoyed by all the D-brand product placements. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.